Hey, good afternoon to you. Great to have you with us. It's 4:06 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Tim Graham is going to join us from NewsBusters. We will chat with him about what's going on with the media right now. It is a wild time, isn't it? And we'll also get a sense of what's going to happen this weekend at the Super Bowl without the Joe Biden interview. They're skipping the Joe Biden interview. It's not actually their choice. It was his. He skipped it. Or somebody around him made him skip it because his mind doesn't work. And then Luke Rosiak will be with us in the next hour. We'll talk to him about the ongoing chaos in Fairfax County schools. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I'm laughing to myself right now because there's an amazing thing going on right now. Chris Murphy is a senator who just negotiated this awful immigration package that was designed to normalize the chaos on our border. And he's been insisting that it's now Republicans' fault. The border crisis is now Republicans' fault. And there's a bunch of things happening here. He's tweeting today about something that Roger Marshall said, Senator Roger Marshall. Roger Marshall referred to the border invasion as an invasion, right? An invasion. Chris Murphy has responded to this. An hour ago, he tweeted the following. Quote, "The invasion rhetoric is lazy, xenophobic, political gruel. History will not look kindly on the fear-mongers who spew it," he says. Now, this gets even better. I swear to you, this is real. So Murphy says that history's not going to look kindly on anybody who says invasion, you xenophobe. Earlier this week, Al Sharpton referred to the border crisis as an invasion while talking to Chris Murphy, the very person who's now saying this is xenophobic bigotry. Listen.
Well, what is being done to get the public to really rise up in various states to say to their senators that they want to see the border issue resolved? I mean, you're getting migrants beating up policemen in the streets in New York. You're seeing an influx of migrants all over the country that frankly have people outraged. And couldn't there be some kind of public pressure put in the next couple of days in some of these senator states saying, why are you allowing this to continue? Because at the end of the day, senators have to deal with their voters. And at the same time, in the bill, you give money to Gaza, to civilians in Gaza and Israel. But the border, I mean, we're looking every day at the invasion of migrants, and they're playing a time game with politics on this. Couldn't that pressure put to bear in their home states?
So that's a question. And Chris Murphy is nodding along on the other side of the screen the whole time. So there you go. That's in a wild week for Democrats where they're really all over the place in their messaging. You now have Senator Chris Murphy accusing Al Sharpton of being a xenophobic bigot. So we've arrived there on a Friday. Just wonderful. Just wonderful. Elsewhere on Twitter, we had a big interview last night so in the midst, so there was a lot happening yesterday. You get the Robert Hur report that comes out, and we shared the details with you. Yeah, he's like, Joe Biden forgets everything. He's not competent to stand trial, says Robert Hur, Justice Department attorney. And then last night at around 6 p.m., Tucker Carlson released an interview that he had conducted, first one in, I think, 4 years, with a Western journalist doing an interview with Vladimir Putin. And it was over 2 hours long. 2 hours long. So I was watching this last night. And then the Biden press conference happens, and you have to kind of balance all of these things at once, trying to jump around, trying to see what the heck's going on in all these news-making events. But let's talk about this Tucker Carlson, Vladimir Putin interview. 2 hours. 2 hours long, straight through, no edits whatsoever, other than just cutting back and forth between their respective cameras. And you get to hear the two of them go. And really, a lot of it was just a monologue from Putin, a very slow, deliberative monologue. And as it started, Tucker kind of pointed out that he thought Putin was really just trying to filibuster. His impression at first was because Putin used the first half hour of the interview to talk about centuries of Russian history, literally centuries of Russian history, to try and explain why he has some sort of claim, or the Russians have some sort of claim to territories within Ukraine. Okay. And Tucker's impression at first was like, God, he's just filibustering this thing. And here's actually Tucker explaining that before the interview about what he thought happened.
So we just finished our interview with Vladimir Putin. We're in an ante-room.
Of course, this is a reaction video to the interview, but he's explaining what happened.
In the Kremlin, waiting for our car to come, having a cup of coffee. I'm sitting here with the folder, kind of old-fashioned, I haven't even opened it yet, of documents that Putin gave me. I've got my nighttime reading. That was quite an interview. It began in a way I didn't expect at all. I'm still thinking it through. This just happened, so my thoughts are inchoate. But I asked him, of course, the obvious question, which is, why did you move against Ukraine 2 years ago, February 2022? And he had said that he felt a physical threat from NATO within Ukraine, and he was worried they were going to bring nuclear weapons into Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. So I asked him about that. He launched into, well, you'll see it, but an extremely detailed history going back to the 9th century of the formation of Russia from the tribes into a nation, and Ukraine's part in that, and the Rus, and I was annoyed, and I thought, look, first of all, I'm American, so I ask you a specific question, I want a specific answer, let's go. And he wouldn't. And so I pushed him, and he got annoyed, and I was annoyed, and I thought he was filibustering, and maybe he was to some extent. But I concluded after watching all this, no, that was his answer, or that was the predicate to his answer. The history of the area and the formation of his country and the connection to Ukraine is like the basis, or part of the basis, for his Ukraine policy. So it was really interesting. Got much more interesting once I realized what this was.
Yeah, and also the interview, again, stretched over 2 hours, and it finally concluded when Putin was like, is there anything else? And Tucker said no, and they concluded their interview. Again, after 2 hours, they'd gone very long. So it wasn't like he was just trying to steal time from the interview. They went on and on and on. Now, during that interview, Putin had quite a bit to say, as you'd imagine. And among those things, remember, Putin has claimed that the reason he's doing this is supposedly denazification, that he wants to denazify the Ukraine and force Ukraine to tear down a number of statues and honors for, former Nazis. And here's Putin saying that he hasn't achieved his aims. Now, I have to say that I was unimpressed with Putin's ability to communicate. Now, I granted it's in Russian and it's being translated, but obviously I watched the whole thing. I thought, this is a guy, and Tucker even said in a later video that he's not really good at communicating. He's not used to having to explain himself. And as a result, he's also not good at actually influencing people, because it seemed like at times that he was just trying to convince Tucker personally. He wasn't really contemplating the audience he was speaking to. He didn't really come across as compelling. Now, maybe this was designed for a Russian audience, in his view, to try and compel them to buy into what he was saying. But certainly, it didn't go a long way towards convincing people that Putin had some sort of noble goal. He could barely explain himself. He talked a lot at a slow pace, but he wasn't great at explaining things. Here's Putin saying he hasn't achieved his aims of, quote, denazification.
No, we haven't achieved our aims yet, because one of them is denazification. This means the prohibition of all kinds of neo-Nazi movements. This is one of the problems that we discussed during the negotiation process, which ended in Istanbul early this year. And it was not our initiative, because we were told by the Europeans, in particular, that it was necessary to create conditions for the final signing of the documents. My counterparts in France and Germany said, how can you imagine them signing a treaty with a gun to their heads?
All right, so this is a common theme throughout the 2 hours, which is that Putin claims that he's ready for peace, he's ready for a negotiated peace, and that it's the West that has been, on a routine basis, upending any attempt to arrive at a peace deal. And also he's demanding a precondition, which is that the West stops sending weapons as a way to get there. So clearly he's arguing, in part from a position of weakness, obviously, because he's lost a lot of people, and he wasn't able to take as much territory as he was hoping to in Ukraine. Heck, he couldn't really even get to Kiev in the first place. which is something that Tommy Tuberville's been pointing out here, the Alabama senator. He's like, wait a second, if he can't get to Kiev, what are the chances that he's going to push even further west to places like Poland? In fact, he was asked about this. What are your ambitions beyond Ukraine? Here's how Putin explained it.
Well, he invaded Ukraine. He has territorial aims across the continent, and you're saying unequivocally you don't.
Это абсолютно исключено.
It is absolutely out of the question. You just don't have to be any kind of analyst. It goes against common sense to get involved in some kind of a global war.
Yeah, and he says that the only way that he envisions Russian troops in Poland is if Poland attacks Russia. That's what he said yesterday. Again, of course, you can add heavily, of course, all the qualifier at all of this is he telling the truth? Is he lying? But again, just in terms of the logistics of it, the guy wasn't able to get to Kiev. What are the chances he invades a NATO country? Tucker asked Putin who blew up Nord Stream. Of course, it was not in the Russian interest at all to destroy one of their energy lines. And the news has borne out that it was some faction within Ukraine. Now, how much backing did they have from the West, including the United States? This is all a mystery still. The answers are still unfolding. Tucker asked Putin about his hunch here.
Who blew up Nord Stream?
You for sure.
I was busy that day. Nate, do you have I did not blow up Nord Stream. Thank you, though.
У вас лично, может быть, есть алиби. У вас лично.
You personally may have an alibi, but the CIA has no such alibi.
Do you have evidence that NATO or the CIA did it?
Вы знаете,
You know, I won't get into details, but people always say in such cases, look for someone who is interested. But in this case, we should not only look for someone who is interested, but also for someone who has capabilities. Because there may be many people interested, but not all of them are capable of sinking to the bottom of the Baltic Sea and carrying out this explosion. These two components should be connected. Who is interested and who is capable of doing
that's a not so subtle way of saying it's the United States who did it. In other words, like, who has the technology to actually be able to pull this off is the claim that Putin is making there. Tucker also, in the lead up to this, we covered it to a great extent. There were so many people in the left-wing media who were just like, Tucker's a Putin puppet. He's going there to spread propaganda and blah, blah, blah. It's just like so crazy. They're all insane. They didn't see the interview and they made that assessment because they hate Tucker, because they have different politics than he does and they defend the regime here. That's it. That's all. That's all the math that's necessary. But to their great discontent, Tucker did ask Putin about a journalist from the Wall Street Journal by the name of Evan Gershkovich. Now, Tucker asked this towards the end of the interview, and then they went back into some other issues. It's not surprising to see why, from my perspective, why he would save this for towards the end of the interview, because he's saving a question that he knows is going to probably animate Putin and may foreclose on his ability to get more answers on other issues. So he brings it up towards the end. And it's actually not just asking about him. He straight up asked Putin, hey, would you turn him over to me? I'd like to bring him back to the United States right now. Here's the question.
I just got to ask you one last question, and that's about someone who's very famous in the United States, probably not here, Evan Gershkovich, who's the Wall Street Journal reporter. He's 32, and he's been in prison for almost a year. This is a huge story in the United States, and I just want to ask you directly, without getting into the details of it or your version of what happened, if as a sign of your decency, you would be willing to release him to us and we'll bring him back to the United States.
Мы столько сделали жестов доброй воли, что, мне кажется, мы исчерпали все линии.
We have done so many gestures of goodwill out of decency that I think we have run out of them.
Ни разу не ответил.
We have never seen anyone reciprocate to us in a similar manner. However, in theory, we can say that we do not rule out that we can do that if our partners take reciprocal steps.
In other words, he has leverage.
When I talk about the partners, I first of all refer to special services. Special services are in contact with one another. They are talking about the matter in question.
The Russian and U.S. governments.
There is no taboo to settle this issue. We are willing to solve it. But there are certain terms being discussed via special services channels. I believe an agreement can be reached.
So typically, I mean, this stuff has happened for obviously centuries. One country catches another spy within its borders, it trades it for one of its own intel guys in another country. I think what makes, and it's not my business, but what makes this different is the guy's obviously not a spy, he's a kid. And maybe he was breaking your law in some way, but he's not a super spy, and everybody knows that. And he's being held hostage in exchange, which is true. With respect, it's true, and everyone knows it's true. So maybe he's in a different category. Maybe it's not fair to ask for, somebody else in exchange for letting him out. Maybe it degrades Russia to do that.
Вы знаете, можно как угодно говорить, что такое шпион, что не шпион.
You can give different interpretations to what constitutes a spy, but there are certain things provided by law. If a person gets secret information and does that in conspiratorial manner, then this is qualified as espionage. And that is exactly what he was doing. He was receiving classified, confidential information, and he did it covertly. Maybe he did that out of carelessness or his own initiative. Considering the sheer fact, this is qualified as espionage. The fact has been proven, as he was caught red-handed when he was receiving this information.
Putin does indicate, though, that he is open to releasing this Wall Street Journal reporter, also indicating during the interview that he is looking for a negotiated peace on Ukraine. We'll see if that's true. A really fascinating and historic interview. Tucker Carlson talking to Vladimir Putin. For years now, the media have claimed that Joe Biden is as fit as a fiddle. That guy remembers everything. The smartest man in the room. They're not saying that now. What has changed? We will talk coming up with Tim Graham from NewsBusters. He's been tracking all of it for years as well. Tim joins us just moments away. Hey there, good afternoon to you. 4:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, we've got Luke Rosiak joining us at 5:30 with some new reporting on what's going on in Fairfax County schools. Don't like porn in the schools? Well, there's a way to deal with it, and it involves a very freaky group of people who are going to assess it. It's one of the weirdest stories ever. Luke Rosiak with an update on that nonsense. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Boy, oh boy, the media, they're now saying that Joe Biden may not be all there. There may be a few marbles that rolled out of the White House. But that's not what they were saying, 48 hours ago. Here's some of the media that captured by NewsBusters in an excellent supercut.
If you're concerned about Joe Biden's age, you probably don't know Joe Biden. Biden is actually in good shape.
Right. Mentally, he's quite acute.
Any aide who engages with him or reporters, we can see this. The gears of his mind are working.
The right-wing media has so fixated on Biden and Biden purportedly having cognitive issues.
It's not just making an issue of Biden's age. It's lying. It's saying he's senile. It's saying he's demented, saying he's out of it.
Russian television has been filled with speculation about President Biden's age, about his mental state of mind.
That's an issue pushed by right-wing media, but it's not correct.
Yeah, Republicans on the other side have spent 4 years almost kind of weaponizing Biden's age against him. Trump is not that much younger than him.
Biden is just a couple of years older than Donald Trump.
Why so much attention on Biden's age? Trump isn't much younger.
This whole vein is really, really unseemly. I mean, ageism.
I'm going to say quite bluntly, there is some ageism going on here.
Yeah, I think there is some ageism going on.
Biden's personal physician wrote that he, quote, remains a healthy, vigorous 80-year-old male.
He is a healthy, vigorous 80-year-old male.
He had a good physical. His doctor says he's vigorous.
The reality is nothing like the dystopian picture that the Republicans are trying to paint of this senile, doddering president, and he's as sharp as a tack.
Yeah, a bunch of conspiracy theorists saying that he's not with it. Now, among those conspiracy theorists, The United States Department of Justice. Joining us now to talk about this, Tim Graham, executive editor over at NewsBusters and the host of the NewsBusters podcast. Tim, good to have you with us, sir.
He's sharp as a tack. That's just the best.
It's a very blunt tack, to be honest with you. What happened here? I mean, the media reflexively defending him for these past 3 years. Suddenly, they've got some questions. What's going on?
Well, obviously, in recent days, he's repeatedly said, well, I spoke in 2021 to Mitterrand, who died in 96, and then I talked to Helmut Kohl, the German chancellor, died in 2017, and these things are piling up. He couldn't figure out who's the opposition in Israel again? Hamas, sir. Oh, that's right. And they know that these are happening. They generally will not put them on TV. Well, here he was. The Hur report comes out, says he has mental issues. He can't remember when he was vice president. He can't remember when his son Bo died. And we know he talks about his son Bo dying about every 10 minutes. And then he acted outraged that this came up. Then he held this angry presser last night. That's where it kind of came unglued, because at the end he's like trying to suggest, I was talking to the president of Mexico, President Sisi. No, that's Egypt, which just plays into the other ones. So obviously the problem is deepened, and they're fighting with him because they're like, what do the polls show, Vince? 76% in the latest NBC poll had mild or moderate concern about Biden's mental and physical health in a second term.
Well, it's honestly, if he wasn't president of the United States, you'd probably look at it from the outside and be like, this is just a deeply tragic story involving an old person who's totally losing it. We saw it play out with Dianne Feinstein in the Senate, right? And Democrats there were much more willing to say out loud, maybe it's time for her to go. This is a big problem. But that's because that's a safe bet. If they get rid of her, they can replace her with a Democrat in California. It's very different with the president of the United States. And we've seen a lot of these Democrats just close ranks around Biden in the last 24 hours. They're now saying the Justice Department is politicized against him.
Right. Robert Hur is somehow a Republican. Ari Melber was making this joke that maybe he should apply to be White House physician, that this was inappropriate. The big term they kept using today between the vice president and Ian Sams, the spokesman at the briefing, was gratuitous. They were gratuitous in bringing this up. So Biden's Justice Department has 40 felony counts against Trump. That's always considered fair. This guy comes out and says, I'm not charging Trump because he's kind of an old man who the jury would not convict.
Not charging Biden.
And they're screaming that this was rude, that the prosecutor would say he's too inept to try.
Yes. Well, I mean, if there's a silver lining here, Trump can say, well, the Justice Department thinks I'm of sound mind. They obviously, there's A+ on Trump's brain, according to the United States Department of Justice under Joe Biden. That's amazing. So this gets to this weekend. Traditionally, since Obama, presidents of the United States sit for an interview during the Super Bowl. The White House has turned down this year. Now, this is the second year in a row Joe Biden has turned down the Super Bowl interview. This, my guess is, the events of the last 48 hours definitely reveal why, don't they?
Yeah, well, let's give credit to Joe Wolfson at Fox News Digital, who was saying this days ago. When it came out that they weren't going to do this, he said, Robert Hur's report is coming out. That's probably why they don't want to do this. Now, we could all say, well, they don't want to do it because they're concerned about Biden in general and what he's going to say. This was, of course, a recorded interview with CBS, which probably would have been like Gayle King or another one of these Scott Pelley softball sessions. So It's not like they had to, it wasn't live like this press conference last night.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So in other words, they were very scared about, we saw some reporting a couple days ago that the White House was nervous about this report coming out. And I remember reading it thinking, what could they be nervous about? They know they're not being charged. That reporting's been out there for a while. It turns out it was this detail, that Joe Biden's brain is not functioning.
Oh, how could you hear this and not hear Chris Plant? It's a broke. It's a no good.
I know. It's funny you say that because yesterday during our show, I wasn't sure. Chris has a busy schedule, of course, because he's got the Newsmax television show and his radio program. But as this news was breaking, Chris Plant's voice saying that kept running through my head. So I told Corey, my producer here on a break, I was like, I got to call Chris. I got to get him on the air if we can get him. And I tried calling him. No answer at the time. He was probably doing work, But you're right. His brains are broke. It's a no good. It's not good. And now everybody knows.
Yeah, it used to be a right-wing conspiracy, but reality's broken out.
Yeah. So, how do the media handle this, do you think, in the days and weeks ahead?
Well, there's a mix. I think they are trying to say Ed O'Keefe was hilarious this morning on CBS. He goes, "Who among us hasn't confused Mexico and Egypt?" None of us. Uh-huh. Precisely none of us. But they also kind of have this whole sound of, "Ooh, this is not good." So
yes.
It's bad enough that the Democrats are saying on television what they usually only share among themselves.
Totally. Well, actually, I do have something of an inclination of where this is all headed. Unfortunately, the report is it's going to get darker, actually, because Biden doesn't have a good case to make. So they're going to try and make a very aggressive, dark case against Trump. Here's Paul Begala on CNN today laying out this.
This is terrible for Democrats. And anybody with a functioning brain knows that. But here's what you do. Instead of calling a press conference saying, I really am sharp, you attack the other guy. Joe Biden gave the strategy in 2012. I remember he was vice president. And he said, don't compare us to the almighty, compare us to the alternative. So everything with Biden has to be not, I'm great, but the other guy's really damaging, dangerous, a threat. This is an unlovely. John's exactly right? This is going to be a really rough, ugly, unpleasant campaign. Look at years ago, David Duke, the former Klansman, was running for governor against Edwin Edwards, who'd been charged, indicted, convicted of any number of criminals. Edwin won the campaign with a bumper sticker that said, vote for the crook. It's important. And they got to tell Democrats, look, vote for the old guy. Support the old guy. It's important.
So you think they blew it last night? Just to be clear, you think last night was a mistake to have him out there?
Well,
Paul?
No, I want to see more Joe Biden, but the gaffes are built in. But instead of simply saying, I'm okay, he needs to be on the attack 24/7 for the next 269 days.
Uplifting. Uplifting message from Paul right there.
So I obviously, they're just kind of talking it out on CNN, but I think Paul Begala is saying something very real, Tim, which is that the case is so bad for Biden that they have to get super dark about Trump. Do you expect that?
Well, yes, this is really the Begala playbook. Begala with Bill Clinton was always going to attack everybody else for being a draft dodger, just shamelessly. It didn't matter. Everybody else was an adulterer. He would attack everyone and say, I know you are, but what am I? Or I know I am, but what are you? This is the way that they fight. But, the problem they have here is if the American people decide both of these guys are too old, we want an alternative, well, then you're going to have a big third-party mess in there. And we know how much the Democrats fear and hate the idea of a third-party presence. And this is what's so hilarious, because it's like, aren't you the guys that just love democracy?
Yes, well, that's right. And we had a Marianne Williamson drop out this week, but Cornel West and also Robert Kennedy very much in it, and it is causing quite a bit of panic on the left because it turns out they are drawing many more votes from the left than they are from the right, and as a result, Donald Trump, and just in terms of the politics of this, had, I would say, in addition to that Supreme Court hearing yesterday, a very good day politically.
Absolutely. And, they came into the Supreme Court hearing going, oh, this is going to be something else. And they put it on live. They had audio of the Supreme Court hearing live, and they came out and they were like, oh, that's not good. That was not a good day.
Yes.
For the Democrats.
No, not at all. In fact, CNN, covered for like 8 seconds Donald Trump's remarks in the wake of yesterday's Supreme Court hearing, and then they cut away and they said they couldn't show it anymore. It was like, so we'll probably get a lot more treatment like that, Tim.
Well, this is where I would say once again, Biden goes out there last night and says, I'm sharp as a tack. Nobody thinks that the press doesn't think I've lost it. Nobody thinks I've lost it. And Rachel Maddow, where's the break-in? We're not we're not going to air Joe Biden lying like this?
No, in fact, Rachel Maddow was bragging last night that Joe Biden rides bicycles, so therefore he's obviously a brilliant human being.
Hasn't she ever seen the clip of him falling off his bike?
I have. It's both
come
sad
on.
and amusing. I have to
Come
admit.
on.
That's crazy.
She doesn't watch any memes, I guess.
No, not at all. All right, Tim Graham over at NewsBusters. Please keep up the great work at that website. It's a real benefit to America. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Vince.
Great to talk to you. Yeah, that's Tim Graham. So, so you've got Joe Biden. It'll be interesting. So the point of all that, my conversation with Tim, right now the media are responding to this because it's just so obvious. It's too obvious to the American people. When you have a claim inside of a Department of Justice report right there on the first page or two that Joe Biden's mental faculties are not all there and therefore a jury wouldn't find him guilty, you've got to contend with that. You've got to do something with it. So you get a number of questions from the press in the last 48. But what happens next? And the answer to that, I think, is what Paul Begala just said, which is that the media are going to go dark. And I don't mean they're going to shut off, although any number of these outlets probably should. I mean that they're going to get very dark beyond where they've already been when it comes to how they talk about Trump. They need to demonize him in order to justify keeping somebody who otherwise shouldn't be in office in office. It's that, yeah, he can't think. Yeah, he maintains a 4-hour-a-day schedule. Yeah, he's probably not the right guy to manage our national affairs. But don't worry, there's people around him. They can handle all of that. He's sort of just a mascot. But the alternative is so much worse. Donald Trump, the authoritarian, the threat to democracy. That kind of stuff is going to ramp up aggressively. And so unless they replace Joe, unless they replace him, as the months barrel ahead and Joe Biden is not up to the task of even campaigning, the media is going to grab an oar and help the DNC as much as they can with the attack plan against Donald Trump. That's what's coming. It's 4:49. Coming up, I've got some details about a shooting in Times Square last night. Apparently, the gunman, an illegal immigrant from Venezuela. We'll talk about that. Another attack in New York. As always, you'll join us at 888-630-9625. I've got Russ calling in on line 2 from Gaithersburg. Russ, good afternoon. Thanks for waiting. You're on the Vince Colonnese Show.
Good afternoon, Vince. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I hear you. Go for it.
Yeah. Thank you for taking my call. I want to talk about the much anticipated and hyped interview of Tucker Carlson with Vladimir Putin.
Yes.
And we were waiting for Tucker to show us the real reason why Russia invaded Ukraine, and instead we got a lecture about Russian history, and the lecture was wrong too. Just for your audience, the Kiev, or like you like to call it Kiev, was founded in 482, and Moscow wasn't there until 12th century.
So he got his history wrong.
Even history wrong, but look at what really it shows. It shows that we're dealing with completely insane man who think that Ukraine does not exist. It's not a real nation or a real country. He contradicted himself many times, saying that Zelensky is real president, United States recognize him, EU recognize him, but it's all as a result of coup that happened in 2004, then 14, and Tucker also threw him some softballs, and of course Tucker had his own agenda, wanted to show that the reason for invasion was really U.S. and NATO expansion, but Putin wasn't fighting until Tucker asked the leading question. So didn't you say that really the NATO is the reason why NATO expansion?
He did say that, yeah, which he did. He did in that speech he gave.
Yeah, I know, but he started with lecture of history.
Yeah, I know. It was frustrating. I agree. It was frustrating, and I don't think, like I said before, I don't think Putin's a very good communicator in terms of like convincing people to come to his side. I was not in any way convinced by that. And there's a couple observations other observations I had about this. One is obviously he definitely does his research on people as a KGB guy. He did research on Tucker. He was bringing up biographical details about him during the interview to either impress him or try and hector him. He's also very impressed with himself, clearly, Putin. He's not used to anybody really questioning his judgment, definitely. He expects the people he's lecturing to hang on to every word that comes out of his mouth. He doesn't know how to message at all. That was, like I said, the big takeaway I had. He's very literal. He didn't pick up on any subtext in Tucker's questions. He just took them literally and then tried to answer them literally. The other piece is he's an atheist. He talked a lot about the Orthodox Church, but he very clearly saw it only as a vehicle for kind of his country. It's a cultural and social value to having religion. But when Tucker asked him about whether or not he detects good and evil, he just kind of laughed it off. It almost seemed like he thought it would be weak to acknowledge the role that God plays in our lives, which told me immediately that guy's an atheist, and I could smell it a million miles away, or however far Russia is from us. Coming up, we've got joining us Luke Rosiak from the Daily Wire. We're going to talk to him about what's going on in Fairfax County. A lot ahead here.